The shuttle door opened with a soft hiss, and Lieutenant Una Park stepped onto Kara's station for the first time. The air smelled different here, clean but strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. She pulled her small bag over her shoulder and looked around at the massive trading hub that would be her home for the next 2 years. Kara's station was the largest neutral space in the known galaxy. Ships from 100 different worlds came here to trade, to talk, and sometimes to argue. The hallways were wide enough for creatures of all sizes. Small insect-like beings walked beside tall, scaled warriors. Floating jellyfish creatures drifted past merchants with too many arms. Una had studied all the species in her training, but seeing them in person was something else entirely. She was 28 years old, born in a small town on Earth, and this was her first posting outside human space. Her job was simple on paper. She would serve as a human liaison in the diplomatic quarter, helping to smooth over any problems between humans and the alien species on the station. In reality, she knew it meant long hours, difficult conversations, and probably a lot of paperwork. A small robot floated toward her and beeped twice. "Lieutenant Park? Please follow me to your quarters." Una nodded and walked behind the robot through the winding corridors. She passed markets selling foods she did not recognize, entertainment halls playing music that hurt her ears, and medical bays where doctors with 6 arms treated patients with no arms at all. It was overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. Her quarters were small but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out into the endless black of space. She unpacked her few belongings, some clothes, a photo of her family, a worn paperback book her grandmother had given her, and sat on the bed. "You can do this," she told herself quietly. The first 2 days passed without trouble. Una attended meetings, memorized names she could barely pronounce, and tried to learn the station's layout. Kara's station was like a city in space, and she got lost more times than she wanted to admit. On her 3rd day, something changed. She was trying to find a shortcut to the diplomatic quarter when she took a wrong turn. The hallway became darker, the walls older. Warning signs in languages she did not understand covered the doors. She realized she had wandered into a restricted maintenance section, and she was about to turn back when she heard it. A sound, soft and high, like crying. Una stopped. She listened. The sound came again, 3 small voices, frightened and weak. Against her better judgment, she followed the noise deeper into the corridor until she reached a heavy door marked with red symbols. The door was sealed, but not locked. She pushed it open. Inside was a small chamber filled with pipes and machines. Cold mist hung in the air, and the sharp smell of chemicals burned her nose. And there, huddled in the far corner, were 3 small creatures. Una's heart nearly stopped. She recognized them immediately from her training files. They were Valorian cubs. The Valorians were one of the most powerful species in the galaxy. They were apex predators hunters at the top of every food chain they had ever encountered. Adult Valorians stood 8 feet tall, covered in silver fur, with glowing amber eyes and claws that could cut through steel. They were respected and feared in equal measure, but their cubs were sacred. No outsider was ever allowed near Valorian young. It was their most important law, and breaking it meant death. Yet here were 3 cubs, alone and trapped in a broken maintenance room. Una could see what had happened. A pipe had burst, and green coolant was leaking onto the floor. The substance was toxic, not immediately deadly, but dangerous if breathed for too long. The cubs had probably wandered in through a vent and gotten stuck when the door sealed behind them. The smart thing to do was to call for help. Contact station security. Let the Valorians handle their own. Una reached for her communicator, but then she saw the smallest cub collapse against the wall, its breathing shallow and fast. There was no time. She ran to the broken pipe. The metal was frozen from the coolant, cold enough to burn. She grabbed it anyway, using her bare hands to bend the pipe back into place and stop the leak. Pain shot through her palms as the cold metal tore at her skin, but she did not let go. She held it until the leak stopped. Then she pulled off her thermal jacket, the one piece of clothing, keeping her warm in the cold station, and wrapped it around the 3 cubs. She gathered them in her arms. They were heavier than they looked, all fur and muscle even at their young age. The largest one looked up at her with wide amber eyes, confused but no longer afraid. "It's okay," Una said softly. "I've got you." She carried them out of the maintenance section, through the corridors, ignoring the stares from other species. Her hands were bleeding, her arms were shaking, but she did not stop until she reached the Valorian quarter. 2 massive Valorian guards blocked her path, their claws extended, their eyes burning with anger. "Human," one of them growled. "You touch our young. This is forbidden." Una stood her ground, though her knees wanted to give out. They were trapped in a maintenance room. Toxic leak. They needed help. The guards looked at the cubs in her arms, at the thermal jacket wrapped around them, at the green coolant stains on Una's uniform, at her burned and bleeding hands. One of the cubs, the smallest one, made a soft chirping sound and pressed closer to Una's chest. For a long moment, no one moved. Then an older Valorian appeared behind the guards, a female with gray streaks in her silver fur. She looked at the cubs, then at Una, then at the cubs again. "Release them to me," the elder said. Una gently set the cubs down. They did not run to the elder immediately. Instead, they looked back at Una, their amber eyes curious and sad. "What is your name, human?" the elder asked. "Lieutenant Una Park." The elder nodded slowly. "Your hands. You burned them for our young?" Una looked down at her palms, red and raw and still bleeding. They were scared. They needed help. "That's all." The elder said nothing more. She gathered the cubs and disappeared into the Valorian quarter. The guards lowered their claws, but did not move. Una turned and walked away, her whole body trembling. She did not know the cubs' names yet. She did not know that the largest was called Ren, the middle one Tavi, and the smallest Miru. She did not know that they would remember her scent forever. She did not know that her life had just changed completely. All she knew was that 3 small creatures had been in danger, and she had helped them. That was enough. That was always enough. 3 weeks passed after the incident in the maintenance room. Una's hands healed slowly, leaving thin white scars across her palms. The station medical officer, a 4-armed being named Dr. Paul, had done excellent work, but human skin was fragile compared to most species. Una returned to her normal duties. She attended diplomatic meetings, filed reports, and tried to learn the complicated politics of Kara Station. The incident with the Valorian cubs was officially noted in her record, but nothing more came of it. The Valorian elders had said nothing publicly, no thank you, no complaint, no acknowledgement at all. She assumed they wanted to forget the whole thing. A human had touched their sacred young, and perhaps the best response was silence. Una understood. She did not expect gratitude. She had done what needed to be done, and that was the end of it. Or so she thought. It started on a quiet morning, exactly 23 days after the rescue. Una woke up, got dressed, and opened her door to head to the mess hall for breakfast. Standing in the hallway, sitting perfectly still like a small silver statue, was one of the cubs. Una blinked. The cub blinked back. It was the largest one, Ren, though she did not know his name yet. He was about the size of a large dog, covered in soft silver fur that caught the light. His amber eyes watched her with an expression she could not read. Curious? Hopeful? She was not sure. "Hello," Una said carefully. "Are you lost?" Ren did not answer. He simply stood up and walked beside her as she moved down the hallway. When she turned left, he turned left. When she stopped, he stopped. When she reached the mess hall and sat down with her breakfast tray, he sat next to her feet and waited. Other species in the mess hall stared. A group of insect traders whispered to each other with clicking sounds. Two human officers at a nearby table looked at Una with wide eyes. "Lieutenant Park," one of them said slowly, "is that a Valorian cub?" "Yes," Una said, just as confused as they were. "Why is it following you?" "I have absolutely no idea." She tried to send Ren back to the Valorian quarter after breakfast. She walked him to the entrance, pointed at the doorway, and said very clearly, "Go home." Ren looked at her, looked at the doorway, and then turned around and followed her back to the diplomatic quarter. The next day, there were two cubs. Tavi, the middle one, appeared at her door alongside Ren. She was slightly smaller than her brother, with darker patches of fur around her ears. She had the same patient, watchful expression. The two of them followed Una everywhere, to meetings, to meals, to the observation deck where she liked to watch the ships come and go. By the end of the week, Miru had joined them. Miru was the smallest of the three, the one who had collapsed in the maintenance room. She was also the boldest. While Ren and Tavi were content to walk beside Una or sit near her, Miru demanded more. During a diplomatic briefing between human and Kelleran trade representatives, Miru climbed onto Una's chair, curled up in her lap, and began to purr. The Kelleran ambassador stopped mid-sentence. "Lieutenant Park, there is a predator in your lab." Una looked down at the small ball of silver fur rumbling against her stomach. "Yes, I'm aware. Is this normal for humans?" "No," Una admitted. "This is very much not normal." The briefing continued, but no one could focus. Miru purred louder. That afternoon, Una was called to the office of Station Security Chief Da Won Kim. He was a stern man in his 50s, a veteran officer who had served on Karis Station for over a decade. His office was neat and organized, with security screens covering every wall. "Lieutenant Park," Chief Kim said, gesturing at the screens. "Please explain this." The screen showed security footage from the past week. In every clip, Una was walking through the station with 1, 2, or 3 silver cubs trailing behind her, eating in the mess hall with cubs at her feet, attending meetings with a cub in her lap, walking through the market with cubs pressed against her legs. "I can't explain it, sir," Una said honestly. "I've tried to send them back. They keep returning." Chief Kim leaned back in his chair and rubbed his forehead. "The Valorians are not pleased, Lieutenant. Their cubs have never bonded outside their species. Never. In 10,000 years of recorded history, it has not happened once. I didn't ask for this." "Sir, I know you didn't, but it's happening anyway. And the Valorian elders are calling it an aberration. Some of them think you've done something to the cubs, some kind of human trick or manipulation." Una felt a flash of anger but kept her voice calm. "I saved their lives. That's all I did. I believe you. But the Valorians don't know what to believe. This situation is unprecedented." He paused and looked at her with tired eyes. "Lieutenant, I need you to understand something. If the Valorians decide you're a threat to their young, there's nothing I can do to protect you. They're too powerful. We need their alliance too badly." Una thought about that for a moment. She thought about the 3 cubs who waited for her every morning, who followed her through the station, who purred when she scratched behind their ears. She thought about Miru, the smallest one, who had almost died in that cold maintenance room. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Chief Kim nodded. "Granted. Maybe it's not an aberration," Una said quietly. "Maybe it's a choice." The chief stared at her for a long moment. "What do you mean?" "The cubs aren't being forced to follow me. They're not being tricked. They're choosing to stay with me because they want to. Because I helped them when they were scared and alone, and now they trust me." She met his eyes without looking away. Maybe the Valorians have never seen this before, because no outsider has ever given their cubs a reason to choose them. Chief Kim said nothing. He looked at the security screens, at the small silver shapes that appeared in nearly every frame, always near the same human woman. "That's a dangerous theory, Lieutenant. Maybe, but I think it's true." She left his office and found all 3 cubs waiting for her in the hallway. Ren stood tall and alert, watching for danger. Tavi sat calmly, her tail wrapped around her paws. Miru bounced forward and pressed her head against Yuna's leg, demanding attention. Yuna knelt down and scratched behind Miru's ears. The little cub purred so loudly, the passing officers turned to look. "I don't know why you picked me," Yuna whispered, "but I'm glad you did." She did not know that the Valorian elders were already planning a response. She did not know that her words, "They don't follow, they choose," would be repeated in council chambers across the station. She did not know that her life was about to become much more complicated. All she knew was that 3 small creatures trusted her, and she would not let them down. Not ever. That was a promise she made to herself right there in the hallway. With Miru purring in her arms and Ren and Tavi watching with their ancient amber eyes, she did not know it yet, but that promise would change everything. The summons came at midnight. Yuna was sleeping in her quarters when her door chimed with an urgent message. She opened it to find 2 Valorian guards standing in the hallway, their amber eyes glowing in the dim light. Behind them, Chief Kim stood with a worried expression on his face. "Lieutenant Park," the chief said carefully, "the Valorian Dominion has requested your presence at a formal tribunal." Immediately, Yuna felt her stomach drop, but she kept her voice steady. "What kind of tribunal?" "The kind where they decide if you live or die," the chief said quietly. "I'm sorry. I tried to stop this, but they have the authority. Get dressed. I'll walk with you." 20 minutes later, Yuna stood at the entrance to the Grand Assembly, the largest meeting hall on Kara Station. The doors were massive, carved from dark metal and covered with symbols she did not understand. The Valorian guards pushed them open, and Yuna walked inside. The chamber was enormous. Thousands of seats rose up on all sides, filled with Valorians of every age and rank. Their silver fur caught the light, their amber eyes all fixed on the small human woman walking toward the center of the room. The silence was complete and terrifying. At the far end of the chamber, on a raised platform, sat 12 Valorian elders. They were the oldest and most powerful members of the Dominion, their fur streaked with gray, their eyes ancient and cold. In the center sat the eldest of them all, a massive male with scars across his muzzle and a voice like rolling thunder. His name was Korsith, and he was the High Elder of the Valorian Dominion. "Human," Korsith said, his voice filling the chamber. "You stand accused of corrupting our sacred young. How do you answer?" Yuna looked up at the towering elder and refused to let her fear show. "I answer that I have corrupted no one." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Korsith raised one massive paw, and silence returned. "Our cubs have never bonded with an outsider," Korsith continued. "In 10,000 years, not once. Yet now 3 of our young follow you like shadows. They sleep outside your door. They eat at your feet. They refuse to return to their own kind." His amber eyes burned with anger. "What have you done to them?" "I saved their lives," Yuna said simply. "Nothing more? Saved them?" Korsith laughed, a harsh and bitter sound. "You are human. You are small. You are weak. You have no claws, no fangs, no strength. How could something like you save anyone?" Yuna thought about her grandmother, who had raised 7 children alone during the worst years of Earth's history. She thought about her mother, who had carried wounded soldiers through fire and smoke. She thought about every human who had ever stood against impossible odds and refused to give up. "Maybe strength isn't about claws," she said quietly. The chamber erupted. Valorians roared and snarled, their voices echoing off the walls. Korsith slammed his paw against his throne, demanding silence. "You dare lecture us about strength?" he growled. "We are the greatest hunters in the galaxy. We have conquered worlds. We have never been defeated. And you, a creature we could kill with one strike, you dare to speak of strength?" "I dare," Una said, "because I know what strength really means." Before Korsith could respond, a small voice called out from the back of the chamber. "She kept us warm." Everyone turned. Una turned. And there, pushing through a crowd of adult Valorians, was Miru, the smallest of the three cubs. She ran across the chamber floor, her small paws clicking against the stone, and pressed herself against Una's legs. "She kept us warm," Miru said again, her young voice clear in the sudden silence. "We were cold and scared, and the green water was everywhere. And she came. She burned her hands to save us. She wrapped us in her own covering, even though she was cold too. She carried us when we could not walk." Ren and Tavi appeared behind their sister, breaking free from their handlers. They crossed the chamber and formed a protective circle around Una, facing the elders with their small heads held high. "She did not have to help us," Ren said. His voice was deeper than Miru's, already showing hints of the adult he would become. "She is not our kind. She could have walked away. She could have called for others and let them save us. But she did not. She came herself. She burned herself. For us." Tavi spoke last, her voice soft but steady. "Our own people were not there. The station guards were not there. Only she was there. And she did not hesitate. Not for one moment." The elders stared at the cubs in shock. Valorian young did not speak at tribunals. They did not defy their elders. They did not defend outsiders. But these three did. Korsith leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying Una with new intensity. "You burned your hands to save our cubs?" Una held up her palms, showing the thin white scars. "The pipe was frozen. It was the only way to stop the leak in time. You gave them your own covering, even though you would be cold without it. They were scared. They needed it more than I did. You carried them through the station, knowing that touching Valorian young is forbidden, knowing that our guards might kill you for it." Una looked at the three cubs pressed against her legs, their warm fur soft against her hands. "Yes." Korsith sat back in his throne. For a long moment, he said nothing. The chamber was completely silent. Thousands of Valorians waited for their High Elder to speak. Finally, he raised his head and looked at Una with an expression she had not seen before. It was not anger. It was not suspicion. It was something else entirely. "You are either very brave or very foolish human." "Maybe I'm both," Una said. For the first time, Korsith almost smiled. "Perhaps you are. But bravery and foolishness are not enough. Our laws are clear. An outsider who bonds with our young must prove their worthiness. They must undergo the Volosh'en, the trial of guardianship." A gasp rose from the crowd. Una did not know what the Volosh'en was, but she could tell from the reaction that it was something terrible. "The Volosh'en is designed for Valorians," an elder beside Korsith said. "A human cannot survive it." "Then she will die," Korsith replied, his eyes never leaving Una's face. "And the cubs will learn that they were wrong to choose her." Miru pressed harder against Una's leg, trembling. Ren and Tavi growled softly, their small fangs showing. Una looked down at the three cubs who had chosen her, who trusted her, who loved her in their own way. Then she looked up at the High Elder of the Valorian Dominion. "I accept," she said. The chamber fell silent. Even Korsith looked surprised. "You understand what you are agreeing to?" he asked. "The Velaryon has killed Valorians. It will almost certainly kill you. I understand. And you accept anyway?" Yuna knelt down and gathered the 3 cubs close. She felt their hearts beating against her chest, their warm fur against her scarred hands. She remembered finding them in that cold, dark room, frightened and alone. She remembered the promise she had made to herself in the hallway. "They chose me," she said softly. "Now I choose them." She stood up and faced Korsith with steady eyes. "When do we begin?" The ship landed on Velaris Prime just before dawn. Through the small window, Yuna could see a world of endless white snow and ice stretching to every horizon, broken only by dark mountains and frozen rivers. The temperature outside was 40 degrees below zero. The wind was strong enough to knock down a grown man. This was the homeworld of the Valorians. And it was here that Yuna would face the VELAR Shan. Captain Jizuhan. Yuna's commanding officer had tried everything to stop this. She had argued with the Valorian elders, filed formal protests, and even threatened to end the human alliance with the Dominion. Nothing worked. The trial was Valorian law, and Yuna had accepted it publicly. There was no turning back. "You don't have to do this," Captain Han said as the ship's door opened and freezing air rushed inside. "We can find another way." Yuna shook her head. "There is no other way. And even if there was, I wouldn't take it." She looked at her captain with calm eyes. "The cubs chose me. I have to prove I'm worthy of that choice. You're worthy already. You saved their lives. The Valorians don't see it that way. They need proof. And I'm going to give it to them." A Valorian guard appeared at the door and threw a bundle at Yuna's feet. Inside was a single knife, a small container of water, and a weighted bundle wrapped in thick fur, the symbolic cub she would have to protect during the trial. "The rules are simple," the guard said without emotion. "You will be dropped 50 kilometers from this location. You must survive for 3 days and return here with the symbolic cub unharmed. You may not receive help from anyone. If you fail, you die. If you succeed, you will be judged worthy." Yuna picked up the bundle and strapped it to her chest. It was heavy, about the same weight as Miru, and she felt its warmth against her body. "Any questions?" the guard asked. "No." The guard almost looked impressed. Almost. "Then we begin." An hour later, Yuna stood alone in the frozen wilderness of Velaris Prime. The transport ship was gone. There was no shelter, no trail, no sign of civilization. Just ice and snow and a wind that cut through her thin uniform like 1,000 knives. She started walking. The first day was the worst. The cold was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Her fingers went numb within minutes. Her face burned from the wind. Every breath hurt lungs. She walked in the direction of the starting point, using the position of the sun to guide her. But the sun moved strangely on this world, and she was not sure if she was going the right way. When night fell, the temperature dropped even further. Yuna dug a small hole in a snowbank and curled up inside, using her body heat to keep the symbolic cub warm. She did not sleeping would mean freezing to death, but she rested, conserving her energy for the next day. The second day brought new challenges. She was crossing a frozen river when she heard them, a pack of kethhounds, the wild predators that even adult Valorians feared. They were as big as wolves but faster and meaner, with 6 legs and jaws that could crush bone. There were 7 of them, and they had surrounded her. Yuna pulled out her knife, knowing it would be useless. She could not fight 7 kethhounds. She could barely stand in the freezing wind. But as she watched the creatures circle closer, she noticed something strange. They were thin, too thin. Their ribs showed through their fur, and their movements were weak and desperate. They were starving. Yuna looked around and saw the problem. The river she was crossing ran beside an industrial complex, some kind of Valorian mining operation. Waste from the complex had poisoned the water, killing the fish and small animals that the Kethhounds normally hunted. These creatures were not attacking because they were vicious. They were attacking because they were dying. An idea formed in her mind. It was crazy and dangerous, but it was the only chance she had. Slowly, Yuna lowered her knife and began to walk. Not away from the Kethhounds, but past them, moving carefully toward a rocky ridge she had seen in the distance. The creatures followed, confused but curious. She walked for nearly an hour, the Kethhounds trailing behind her like strange, hungry shadows. Finally, she reached the ridge and found what she was looking for, a thermal vent, one of the natural hot spots that dotted the planet's surface. The ground around the vent was warm, and small burrowing creatures lived in the heated soil. Yuna stepped back and watched as the Kethhounds discovered the prey. Within minutes, they were digging, eating, fighting over the small creatures that emerged from the ground. They forgot about Yuna completely. She slipped away quietly, her heart pounding in her chest. The third day was the longest. Yuna's body was failing. She had not eaten in 3 days. She had barely slept. Her legs shook with every step, and her vision blurred at the edges. The symbolic cub on her chest felt heavier with every kilometer, but she kept walking. She thought about Ren, Tavi, and Miru waiting for her on Carrie Station. She thought about the look in their eyes when they defended her at the tribunal, the trust, the love, the absolute certainty that she was worth fighting for. She could not let them down. She would not let them down. With 50 meters left to go, her legs gave out. Yuna fell face first into the snow and could not get up. Her muscles were frozen. Her body had nothing left to give. She lay there in the cold, staring at the distant marker that meant safety, and felt tears freeze on her cheeks. "Get up," she whispered to herself. Get up. She could not stand, but she could crawl. Inch by inch, she dragged herself through the snow. The symbolic cub was still strapped to her chest, warm against her frozen body. She protected it with every movement, keeping it off the ground, shielding it from the wind. 20 meters. 10 meters. 5 meters. A shadow fell over her. She looked up and saw Korsith standing at the finish line, his massive form blocking out the pale sun. Behind him, dozens of Valorian elders watched in silence. Yuna pulled herself to final meter and collapsed at Korsith's feet. With trembling hands, she unstrapped the symbolic cub and held it up. "It's safe," she whispered. "The cub is safe." Korsith took the bundle from her hands and examined it. The symbolic cub was unharmed, warm, protected, not a single mark on its wrapping. Yuna had carried it for 3 days through ice storms and predators and freezing nights. And she had kept it safe through all of it. The High Elder looked down at the human woman lying in the snow, half dead from cold and exhaustion, and something changed in his ancient amber eyes. "Bring medical help," he said quietly. Now, as Valorian healers rushed forward to help her, Yuna closed her eyes and smiled. She had done it. She had survived. But more importantly, she had proven something that no human had ever proven before. She had shown the greatest hunters in the galaxy that strength was not about claws or fangs or size. It was about heart. It was about never giving up. It was about loving something so much that you would crawl through ice and fire to protect it. The Valorians were beginning to understand Dot, and this was only the beginning. Yuna woke up in a medical bay on Carrie Station. Her body ached in places she did not know could ache. Her fingers were wrapped in healing bandages. Her feet were being treated for severe frostbite. But she was alive, and when she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw were 3 pairs of amber eyes staring down at her. Ren sat at the foot of her bed, watching over her like a guardian. Tavi lay curled beside her, her warm fur pressed against Yuna's arm. and Miru was on her chest, small paws tucked under her chin, purring so loud that the whole bed vibrated. "Hello, little ones," Yuna whispered. Her voice was rough from 3 days of cold. "I'm back." Miru purred louder. Ren made a low, rumbling sound in his chest, a Valorian expression of relief and joy. Tavi pressed closer, as if afraid Yuna would disappear if she let go. The door to the medical bay opened, and Station Security Chief Do-Hwan Kim walked in. He stopped when he saw the scene, a human woman covered in healing wounds, surrounded by 3 Valorian cubs who refused to leave her side. "Lieutenant Park," he said softly, "you survived. I told you I would." "I know. I didn't believe you." He shook his head slowly. "I've been doing this job for 15 years. I've seen a lot of impossible things on this station, but I never thought I'd see a human pass the Valartian." Yuna smiled weakly. Neither did the Valorians. The tribunal reconvened 3 days later, when Yuna was strong enough to stand. Once again, she walked into the Grand Assembly. Once again, thousands of Valorians filled the seats, their amber eyes fixed on the small human woman. But this time, the feeling in the room was different. There was no anger. There was no suspicion. There was something else, something that felt almost like respect. Korsith stood before the assembly, his great silver form towering over everyone else. When he spoke, his voice was softer than before, almost gentle. "I have watched this human," he said. "I have tested her. She has no claws, no fangs, no fur to protect her from the cold. She is small and fragile by our standards. By every measure we know, she should be weak." He paused and looked at Yuna with those ancient amber eyes. "And yet she is not weak. She survived the Velash in a trial that has killed many Valorians. She faced the Kethhounds not with violence but with wisdom. She crawled through the snow when her legs failed, dragging herself to the finish line with nothing but willpower." His voice grew deeper. "She did not abandon the symbolic cub. She protected it with her own body, keeping it warm while she froze." Korsith turned to face the assembly. "I asked why our cubs follow this human. I demanded to know what trick she had used, what sorcery she had practiced. I was wrong to ask these questions." He bowed his great head. "Our cubs do not follow her because of tricks. They follow her because she earned their trust. They follow her because she burned her own hands to save them. They follow her because she wrapped them in her warmth when they were cold and afraid." He looked at Yuna one more time. "They do not follow," Korsith said slowly. "They choose. And I understand now why they chose her." A low hum rose from the crowd, the sound of Valorian approval. It grew louder and louder until the whole chamber vibrated with it. Yuna stood in the center of the storm, tears running down her cheeks, as the greatest hunters in the galaxy acknowledged her as one of their own. Korsith raised his paw, and silence returned. "Lieutenant Yuna Park," he said formally, "I grant you the title of Calvari Chosen Guardian. It is the highest honor we can give to an outsider. From this day forward, you are protected by Valorian law. Any who harm you answer to the Dominion." Yuna bowed her head. "I am honored, High Elder." "The honor is ours. You have taught us something we had forgotten, that strength is not only in claws and fangs. It is in the heart that refuses to give up. It is in the hands that reach out to help, even when helping is dangerous." He almost smiled. Humans are strange creatures, but perhaps that strangeness is what makes you strong. The cycles that followed changed everything. Ren, Tavi, and Miru grew up, but they never forgot the human who had saved them. Ren became a diplomat, working to build the first official alliance between humans and Valorians. He spoke often of the woman who had taught him that different species could trust each other, could even love each other if they were willing to reach out. Tavi joined the Interstellar Medical Corps, traveling to dozens of worlds to help species in need. She remembered how Yuna had burned her hands to save 3 small cubs, and she dedicated her life to helping others with the same selfless spirit. Miru became a poet. Her verses about the soft one who burned for us were taught to every Valorian cub. The story of Yuna Park became a legend, a tale of a weak creature who proved stronger than anyone expected, who showed the galaxy that true strength came from the heart. The Human-Valorian alliance grew powerful. Trade routes opened. Knowledge was shared. The 2 species became partners and friends, working together to face the challenges of the galaxy. And when other species asked the Valorians why they had allied so closely with the fragile, clawless, fangless humans, the answer was always the same. Because they choose to protect, the Valorians would say. Not because they must. Not because they can win, but because it is who they are. They see someone in trouble, and they help. They see someone afraid, and they comfort. They do not ask if it is safe or smart or useful. They simply act. Years passed. Chief Kim retired and became Admiral Kim. He told the story of Lieutenant Yuna Park at every diplomatic function, every training session, every quiet moment when young officers asked him what it meant to be human. I asked her why the cubs were following her, he would say, smiling at the memory. And she told me, "They don't follow, sir. They choose." He would pause then, looking out at whatever stars were visible. That's humanity for you. We don't conquer hearts. We don't demand loyalty. We earn it. We earn it by showing up when others turn away. We earn it by helping when no one expects us to. We earn it by being the ones who care, even when caring costs us everything. Lieutenant Yuna Park lived a long and happy life. She served on Karis Station for another 30 years, watching her 3 cubs grow into powerful adults. Watching the alliance she helped build change the galaxy. When she finally retired, she went back to Earth, to the small town where she had grown up, and she sat on her grandmother's old porch and watched the sunset. Ren, Tavi, and Miru visited her often. Even as adults 8 feet tall, covered in silver fur, with claws that could cut through steel, they would curl up beside her like they had when they were small. They would rest their great heads on her lap, and she would scratch behind their ears, and they would purr like they had on that first day in the hallway. "Why did you save us?" Miru asked her once, many years after it all began. "You didn't know us. We weren't your kind. Why did you risk everything for 3 strangers?" Yuna smiled and touched Miru's face with her scarred hands. "Because you needed help," she said simply. "And I was there. That's all it takes, little one. That's all it ever takes." Miru purred and closed her eyes. And Yuna Park, Calvari of the Valorian Dominion, hero of Karis Station, sat on her grandmother's porch and watched the stars come out, knowing that she had made a difference. Not because she was strong, not because she was special, but because she had chosen to care. And in the end, that was the most human thing of all.